In the previous video, the newlyweds come across a woman who lives on the streets talking about Gu-won's powers, but as he says that he doesn't know her and that it must have just been a coincidence, the protagonist brushes this aside. In the next scene, the couple follow Du Jiang to his parents' house, but because it's too dangerous to enter the enemy's residence, the two decide to end their investigations for the day. Now we see Suk-hoon, who is going after information about the theater that Gu-won runs, and as soon as he receives some photos of the opening of the venue from years ago, the man realizes that Gu-won is in them, and now he starts to believe that the man might be something, like a vampire. Meanwhile, Gu-won has started to take various things that belong to him to the protagonist's house, since he's now going to live with her, and he thought it was right to put the essentials in the apartment, but it turns out that it's really too much stuff, and so the two end up fighting over the mess he's making, with the result that Do-hee throws him out with his belongings. And as a form of protest, the man decides to stay in her car in the parking lot until she begs him to come back. Taking advantage of the fact that the man isn't there, Suk-hoon goes to the house to talk to the protagonist about what she believes she has found out from Gu-won. However, when the man shows him the photos he got and that there is Gu-won in them, Do-hee explains that this was his grandfather at the time, hence the resemblance between the two, and that Suk-hoon should rest assured that there is nothing to worry about. However, the man didn't believe his beloved's words, and to try to find out more, since he feels that the couple are hiding something, Suk-hoon invites Gu-won out for a few drinks. During the conversation, Suk-hoon says that he knows Gu-won isn't human and makes the comparison to a vampire, which the offended demon denies. And although he hasn't found out about Do-hee and Gu-won's secret, Suk-hoon makes it clear that if the man ever threatens the protagonist's life, Suk-hoon won't stand by and watch it happen, and promises to tell everyone what he really is. Meanwhile, the star Jin was walking through the streets of the city a little out of sorts, having had several drinks, and when the woman falls while twisting her ankle, we see the story of how she met Gu-won, since the reason she's in this state is because she found out about the man's marriage to Do-hee, which made her extremely furious, as did the feeling of betrayal, even though they had nothing. When Jia-young was little, her father would take out his anger when he got drunk on the girl, and one day, the demon showed up at their house, while she was hiding from the man, to get the girl's father who had signed a contract with him years ago. Little star Jin knew at the time that she had only survived because of Gu-won, and at the same moment came to believe that he was her guardian angel, but despite this, the demon went away and left her, but Jia-young swore to herself that she would spend her life looking for him to live by her side. Returning to the drunken Jin star, some men began to bother her, wanting to take advantage of her situation, and after she had denied their presence more than once, Jia-young slapped one of the men in the face, which resulted in him returning the aggression. However, before he could do so, Gu-won, who was nearby, saw the scene and grabbed the man's arm, after which the group left and the demon took her home. In his office at the theater, Gu-won talks to Mr. Park about having more frequent dreams that are actually memories of his past life, and what they both come to the conclusion about is that the longer Gu-won goes without his powers, he becomes human, and as a result, his powers may be failing until they cease to exist. Gu-won thinks that this may be why he's having feelings for Do-hee, and hopes that once he gets his tattoo back, everything will return to normal. Later, when the demon is on its way to Do-hee's house, we see that the protagonist's stalker has managed to enter the theater and Gu-won's office. The man has taken the book about the demon and installed a bug under his desk. Meanwhile, Gu-won and Do-hee make up, then as the man's powers are failing, he suggests they sleep together so that he can recharge them all night, and more, our couple become one for real. The next day, the protagonist is woken up with some very bad news. A man who we can say is like an influencer on social media, is doing a live stream that has been going on for hours, talking about the subject that Do-hee is the real culprit behind Madame Ju's death. The man claims that the will was changed on the day the lady died, and that because a person who is not her blood received the entire inheritance, she can only be to blame. He adds the fact that there wasn't another autopsy before the body was cremated, but we know that the protagonist went after all this, and it was the woman's children who denied it. Do-hee knows that this is Suk-min's foul play, and so she and Gu-won teleport to the place where the man is. This feeds more and more into Sukhoon's idea that Gu-won isn't a human, because before they went after the man, Sukhoon had left them alone in the room and didn't see them go out the door. Now we see Do-hee going to talk to Suk-min, and the man doesn't mind confirming that he was the mastermind of the whole mess. So the protagonist talks about his relationship with Madame Ju, in which the woman always said that she gave birth to the seed of evil and that she even tried to fix it by sending him to prison to pay for the crimes he committed, but that wasn't enough. Do-hee tells Suk-min that he believes he didn't run over a man when he was younger because he was drunk, but because of the evil inside him, and after saying these things, the man points the gun he's holding at our protagonist. Do-hee tells him to shoot, and as he takes too long, she starts to turn her back to leave, when suddenly she hears the sound of the bullet coming towards her. Gu-won runs to meet her, and we see that the man has shot her in the side of the head, just to scare her. The woman tells Suk-min that it's cowardly to shoot him in the back, and the man replies that that's how things work in war, so now Do-hee is increasingly thirsty for revenge. Now the couple goes straight to that influencer, and of course Suk-min has left no trace of being connected to the man, as he paid him in Bitcoin, so Gu-won transfers the three of them into a safe and explains that as the influencer wanted to have a lot of money and be famous, now he'll have both, but not for as long as he wants. The man can take as much money as he wants from the safe, but the next day he'll be arrested when he's found inside, and this will give him fame, but not in the way he imagined. The scene cuts and we see that the couple have gone to Gu-won's office, because Mr. Park claims that the demon's book has gone missing. While they are there looking for the object, they explain to Do-hee what the book is about, so that the stalker who bugged the place knows everything. In the next scene, we see the gang that was after Gu-won and got beaten up by him, arriving at the theater, thinking he would have to face them once again. The man is surprised when the current leader bows down to him and Gu-won is appointed their new boss. Meanwhile, the stalker has handed over the manual and the recordings to the mastermind, after which he receives the order to finish Gu-won off when the man is alone, as they have already understood that he only becomes powerful alongside Do-hee. Back at the protagonist's house, as soon as Gu-won leaves to watch the performance of the theater that will open today, she is surprised by the visit of the detective who is there to arrest her for Madame Ju's death. Gu-won then receives the news and rushes out of the theater. However, he also receives a surprise at the front of the venue when Do-hee's stalker stabs him in the heart. The man begins to lose a lot of blood and only stops suffering when Mr. Park arrives and pulls the stalker off Gu-won, at which point the mask he was wearing rips and the demon manages to see his face, but Gu-won soon faints from his injuries. As soon as the detective tells Do-hee what has just happened, he releases her to go and see him, but the woman must go and return without being seen. Meanwhile, Gu-won undergoes surgery, but unfortunately the surgeon warns Mr. Park and Star Jean that because of the blows to his heart, the organ is badly damaged and he probably won't survive. Do-hee then arrives at the hospital and goes to the room where her husband is under observation. There, the already nervous woman is greeted by Star Jean, who shouts at her saying that this is all her fault. Concerned only about saving the man, the protagonist puts her hand on his wrist, but nothing happens. Suk-hoon watches through the little window in the door and finds this reaction very strange. Back in the room, Do-hee starts crying because nothing is working and she doesn't want to lose him. As we know, the protagonist doesn't have many people around her, and for a moment, the tattoo works again, which heals half of Gu-won's wounds. Soon the man wakes up and he is still quite weak, but he asks Do-hee to hug him, and it is this vision that Suk-hoon sees from the outside, not understanding how he has improved so much in a matter of minutes. Do-hee needs to get back to the police station so that neither the detective nor she suffer any consequences. As for Gu-won's condition, we can say that before he had a 1% chance of living, now he has 50%, and as he will spend the night unconscious, the man has some strange dreams in which he is spontaneously combusting. After the 48 hours that Do-hee was detained, Gu-won has woken up and has improved a lot. The good thing is that his safety at the hospital is guaranteed, since the gang has gone to the place and are committed to protecting him. And as soon as Gu-won sees Do-hee, he seems to have improved by 90%. The man asks them to go home to be together, and the way they sleep at night, who's to say that this isn't the real couple? They're falling for each other. In fact, the next day Gu-won and Mr. Park go to the company together, because the man didn't want to be far from his beloved. And that influencer, in the end, managed to convince Gu-won not to leave him at the bank, so he revealed to everyone that he was paid to tell those lies. Now focusing on Gu-won, that dream he had in which he was having spontaneous combustion is terrifying him, and even Mr. Park has noticed it, so he takes him out of the company, and after pressing him, Gu-won tells him about what's bothering him, and his secretary becomes distressed about it too. Meanwhile, Star Jin went to Do-hee's company to talk to Gu-won, and when he didn't find him, he decided to talk to the protagonist. Jae-young tells Do-hee that she should leave Gu-won alone and stop using the tattoo as a bargaining chip, as the man almost lost his life because of her, and that the woman should deal with her own affairs on her own. As she's leaving the protagonist's office, Star Jin runs into Gu-won, so they talk, and Jae-young starts blaming Do-hee for everything that's happening, even though the man makes it clear that she has nothing to do with it. Star Jin realizes that Gu-won is falling in love with the protagonist, so he warns him that if he doesn't hold back his feelings now, he will become more and more human, and then there will be no turning back. At night, Do-hee has trouble sleeping because of the latest events and decides to have a heart-to-heart talk with Madame Ju. The protagonist is afraid of continuing in the ladies' family war and ending up losing Gu-won, so after thinking about it, Do-hee warns Suk-hoon about her decision. The next day, the company's board meeting takes place to decide who will be the new president, which I don't particularly understand. Do-hee has fulfilled all of Madame Ju's requirements. They should give her the job without even thinking about it. And before the vote begins, the protagonist announces that she is withdrawing her candidacy, which comes as a surprise to everyone present. At the end of the meeting, Do-hee tells the late lady's children that she is also going to give up the rest of her inheritance. Gu-won, I believe, is the one who is most shocked by all this information, so he questions the woman outside the building about all the decisions she has just made, and instead of the protagonist telling him about her true motives, Do-hee lies and hurts him by saying that she left the war because he was no longer able to protect her. However, Gu-won knows that Suk-hoon could be behind the protagonist's decision and goes after him to try to understand what made Do-hee change his mind. As soon as he finds him, the man discovers the real reason she gave up. He then looks for the protagonist, who is in Madame Ju's garden. As soon as he finds her, he hears her talk about her fear of losing him. Soon the two realize that Gu-won's powers are working again, so the man is completely cured of his injuries from the attack he suffered, and they go home to do that. The next day, our couple take the opportunity to go out on dates and have fun. The protagonist even learns that in the past demons were like guardians of humans, and that the word has Greek origins, meaning to share a single destiny. When evening comes and they go home, in the hallway of the apartment, Do-hee's heart starts racing when she hears the same music that was playing the day she was tied up on the balcony, but she calms down when she realizes that it was the ringtone of a neighbor of hers. Gu-won doesn't want his beloved to have bad memories every time she hears this song, so when the two of them enter the house, he puts it on and invites the protagonist to dance with him. After they have relaxed, the man tells Do-hee that this will be their song. Meanwhile, Suk-min has taken his son to play golf and has decided to talk to him about what he believes is the real reason his mother hates them. The man thinks that Madame Ju was self-loathing, so she thought their blood was dirty, and because they had it, they ended up hating her. And particularly, I don't think that's the case, because it's not like the family did everything right? If something like that had come from Do-hee, we might even consider it, but these children of Madame Ju's are worthless. Returning to father and son, something curious happens in the middle of their conversation, when Suk-min receives a message. Do-jaeyoung, who has 2 cell phones, one also beeps, which leads me to think that he has cloned his father's phone. The next day, Gu-won tries to use his powers and once again they fail, but the man believes that he just needs to recharge more by being close to the protagonist. Later, Taking advantage of the fact that he's fine and remembers his stalker's face, Gu-won decides to go to the detective to get a sketch of the man. He then prints it out on several pieces of paper and distributes it to the gang who declared him as their boss in order to find him. Taking advantage of being in the theater, Gu-won opens up to Star Jean and talks about his relationship with Do-hee, about what he's feeling for her, and makes it clear that he'll never give up on his beloved wife. He also adds that it's not for Jae-young to cross any more boundaries. In the next scene, we see that the protagonist and Mrs. Shin have gone out drinking to celebrate the end of the family war, but the two of them have had too much alcohol and become very silly. As a result, Gu-won had to ask Mr. Park to help him take Mrs. Shin home so that the man could deal with his wife. And the stalker received a message telling him to get rid of everything that could link him to what had happened, so the man bought gallons of gasoline, and before he started distributing them around the place where he was hiding, we saw who was telling him to do all those things. The man responsible for everything was Suk-min, who showed that he didn't care about taking the life of his loyal hound, because the man took advantage of the situation to finish him off, and when he realized what Suk-min was doing there, he locked himself in his room. Trapped there, Suk-min pours gasoline into the room and then uses his lighter to start what will end his hound's life. And as expected, we see that he was the one who switched his mother's medication, which led to her losing her life. The next day, Do-hee and Gu-won receive the news that the culprit has been found. The stalker's body was found in his hideout all burnt up, and a knife was stuck after he was no longer alive in his chest, which the demon believes is a message to him. After the meeting with the detective is over, Gu-won asks Do-hee to stay with Suk-hoon, and he goes to his foundation, where he looks for a bug and finds it under his desk. The man realizes that there is another culprit behind all this, the real mastermind. It's at this point that Gu-won realizes that the clocks he had representing the time of the contracts he had signed have stopped. This means that the man's powers have completely disappeared, and those who signed their names start coming back with the problems that surrounded them, like that little girl in the hospital whose mother had signed a contract. In the midst of his despair, Gu-won remembers that the homeless woman knew something about him, so the man decides to go to her. The two end up going to an establishment to talk. There, Gu-won realizes that some people see her differently, as a woman with money. And when he complains that the place is a bit too exposed for them to have this kind of conversation, the woman starts snapping her fingers, which changes the scene. At that moment, we discover that she was responsible for giving man his powers. In other words, she is the representation of God. However, it wasn't the woman who took away our Gu-won's powers. She explains that as they are now in an unstable body, they will diminish until they disappear, just like the man who is gradually dying. The only way for the demon to regain his powers is if the protagonist loses her life by the night of the full moon, otherwise the process of Gu-won's demise begins, and there's no way to save them both from it. And at the same time, Star Jean is on a date with Suk-hoon, where she tells the man the whole truth about who Gu-won really is and what Do-hee has to do with this story. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like it and share it to help me. Until next time.